Welcome to the Daily Faceoff Show, your everyday source for the latest news with top-notch insight and analysis. Live every weekday at noon Eastern.
Welcome to the April 15th Good Friday edition of the Daily Faceoff Show. I'm Jason Gregor, along with Chris Gear. And Chris, lots to discuss. Hope you're doing well. Of course, a somber day for hockey fans as one of the greatest goal scorers in NHL history, Mike Bossy, passed away today at the age of 65. And I think like you and me, Chris, a lot of us who grew up, like Mike Bossy was the goal scorer that many kids aspired to be.
Yeah, absolutely. Watching those Islanders teams in the early 80s was such a treat. And Bossy was the guy that drove the bus, right? He was the goal scorer, he was the star. And I grew up in Montreal, and Bossy was a Montrealer, so he had a little special place in the hearts of those of us from Montreal. And like you said, I think a lot of us from that generation grew up watching Bossy and appreciating him, and it's a huge loss for the NHL community. A class act guy all around too.
Yeah, very nice guy in my interactions with him. The thing about Bossy, 9 consecutive 50-goal seasons. Him and Gretzky, the only players to have scored 59 times. Though Ovechkin could get there. He needs 4 more. Like, just a legit sniper. And the great part about Bossy was when he got 50 and 50, he was the second player ever to do it after Maurice Richard. He needed 2 goals in his 50th game. And he got 2 goals in the last 5 minutes of the game to get 50. And earlier that day, Charlie Simmer had scored a hat trick. He had 49 and 50. They played on the same day. And Bossy he had a flair for the dramatics. And when you needed a goal, he could score.
Yeah, incredible performances by him. And, I read an article that he wrote in the Players Tribune, and it got republished today by the NHL and the Islanders. And it was an article that he wrote as a 60-year-old man to his 14-year-old self. And it was just such an interesting way to summarize his career and talk about some of the insights that he learned along the way. And, just a fantastic read for anyone that hasn't read it.
Well, you know what? There's been so much talked about him today. And for people who maybe weren't old enough to remember him, you'll see some highlight films. But not only was a great player, just a genuine human being, and he'll be sorely missed. And I know that the New York Islanders and their fans are, shout out to all of them, because I know they're hurting today a little bit. And let's get to from Mike Bossy into the to the playoff race in the West. And suddenly the Vegas Golden Knights, they're right there. If Frank was here, he'd be yelling points percentage, because they're a .01 points percentage ahead of LA. They're a point behind with the game in hand. And them and the Oilers meet. The Oilers pretty comfortable in a playoff spot. I don't think both LA and Vegas will catch them. One, I guess, could, and they would drop to third. But you look at that game and you look at Vegas now. Chris, who do you like coming down the stretch? Vegas and LA.
It's so funny how quickly things can change, Jason. I think 2 weeks ago on this show, whoever was on, we're talking about Vegas being out of the picture and they just can't do it. And then last week it's like, hey, maybe they have a chance. And then now all of a sudden they're leading in points percentage. And, the Kings have slipped a little bit. Obviously, Doughty is out, so it's going to be a bit of a struggle for them now. But they don't have many playoff teams to play down the stretch here. Their schedule looks like it's fairly light compared to the other teams. So you would think they could get enough wins here to keep that position. But Vegas is charging hard. And even Vancouver behind them isn't totally out of it, only 3 points back of Vegas and 5 wins in a row. So, I think now that Vegas has all of its team back and they're starting to get the chemistry with Eichel and Stone and Pacioretty and these guys, I think Vegas probably sneaks in and LA falls out of it. But, anything can happen here. It's going to be exciting to watch. And thank God we have a race like that to watch.
And it's not only third in the Pacific. The wild card, when you throw in LA, Nashville, Dallas, and Vegas, they're all separated by 2 points. Do you see that wild card race as one team that you like better that could maybe upset either Calgary or Colorado?
Well, I think Nashville is a team that you have to worry about. I know last night they got blanked by the Oilers, but UC Saros is a guy that if he gets hot, he can he can steal a game or a series. And I think Nashville's roster is constructed for playoffs. They've got that mix of guys that can score, but guys that can grind and guys that can wear you down physically. So, I'd be scared of Nashville. Dallas has a lot of horses too, but I'd be a little questionable about their goaltending, whether it's, Ottinger or Wedgwood or Holtby. I'm just not sure that that's, up to quite the same level as Nashville with Saros. So that's the team I'd be afraid of if they matched up with me in a wild card.
Yeah, it's interesting when you look at the Preds and the Stars, same record, but Nashville's plus 23 goal for against differential and Dallas is -3. And usually if you're a minus goal differential, over time that suggests that maybe you're not that good. So I'm kind of curious to see how they'll finish off. Now we go to the East, where there's no race for the playoffs. We know which 8 teams are in, but there's still the race for the wild card. Who's going to be there? Pittsburgh maybe could drop out. Washington is 5 back, but they have 2 games in hand. Then there's Boston. They'll be 3 points behind Tampa Bay. If you're one of those top teams, like, who do you like better as a wild card team that maybe is either an easier matchup for Florida, Carolina / Rangers, or a surprise team that you could see maybe upsetting someone in the East?
Yeah, the East it's been weird, right? Because the 8 teams have been set for so long that you wonder which teams have maybe taken their foot off the gas pedal or just coasting, waiting to start. But there's so much on the line with respect to the seedings and the placement that you'd think they'd be going for it a little more here. So it's tough to judge, but Boston is a bit of a scary team. I think they've had a really solid year. Washington's had that up and down year where you're not really sure what you're going to get on a given night. Goaltending with both of those teams is young and not really proven. Whether it's Samsonov for Washington or it's Swayman and Ullmark for Boston. But I think Boston is a team I'm more scared of if I'm one of the top contenders in the East. How about you, Jason?
Yeah, I like the Bruins defense a lot. I think it's a lot deeper than Washington. The acquisition of Lindholm was huge for them, and Swayman's just been unreal in the second half. But yeah, I'm with you. I would agree on Boston's defense, and I'm kind of curious about the matchups. The Rangers still could catch Carolina, which didn't even seem very plausible a few weeks ago. We all thought Carolina was just going to skate their way in, and now Carolina is going to have to face one of those teams in either Boston or Washington. I'm going to put this out there again. There should be no crossover. I don't care who finishes where in the wild card spot. It should be Metro 4 and the Atlantic 4. There should be no crossover when you have 4 from 4. But that's just me. That's my weekly rant.
Traditionalist
about that. Yeah. Well, if you're going to promote playoffs and rivalries all year, then there's no need to change come playoff time. I get if you have a crossover and it's 5-3, I understand that. But when it's 4-4, I wouldn't have one. It's me. But that leads us now to our big guest, and we're going to talk about a team that is playing very well, but can they get over their hump? Now it's time for All 32 delivered by DoorDash. Use the promo code DFODD or DFODDUS, and you will get 25% off and no delivery on your first order with DoorDash. And we're joined by David Alter from the Leafs Nation. And David, the Leafs are on a roll. Again, they've put themselves 4 points up on Tampa. In a perfect world, who do they want, Tampa or Boston in the first round?
I think they would actually prefer to have Boston only for if you had to put a bullet to them. Like, it's just they played Boston so many times in that first round, and even if they got past the first round, if they had Boston again in a playoff series, that question would come up. Well, you got Boston again. So I think it's just a simple matter of convenience of killing off 2 birds with 1 stone. Tampa, you got the defending Cup champs. They'll feel pretty good about that if they get past them. Even though they are kind of sliding a bit going into the end of the regular season. But Boston's the team that's been haunting them for years, since 2013. If they got Boston and the first-round monkey off their back in one shot, I think that would probably be best serving them at this point.
Yeah, I got to agree with that, David. You got to get that team that's been the thorn in your sides out of the way and then on to the rest. So that's I'm with you there. With the Leafs, we've obviously seen a lot of talk about Austin Matthews. He's having a spectacular year. He's going to easily score 60, might even score 65. But who are a couple other guys on the team that you think are key to their playoff success?
Well, it's definitely number one's got to be Mitch Marner. I mean, he's been a huge part and parcel with what Austin Matthews has been doing. But what Mitch Marner's done this year is he's actually found his way to score, where in the past it was always his playmaking ability. I equate it to a quarterback who's established a good run game now, because now the opposition, when they look at someone like Mitch Marner, they're not just going to assume that he's going to look for the player. Like, he actually has established his shot and can score. So because he's a dual threat now, I think he's a real key. And if he can actually get that shot and score in the playoffs, which he has struggled to in the past, that's number one. Michael Bunting, the other forward on that line, has had a great year, a low cap hit at $950,000. He's also a big part of why Matthews and Marner are able to create that space and get record seasons for themselves. So those are the two guys I look to specifically. And of course, their depth scoring, and a lot of guys underneath that have to step up as well.
What about on their back end? Now that Jake Muzzin is healthy, in the playoffs, defensemen arguably become even more important. You throw in Jack Campbell, but what's their ideal top four? And do you think that come playoff time, they're going to roll heavily at their top four?
Yeah, I mean, there's going to be a reliance on it. It's interesting. Head coach Sheldon Keefe established the other day that there are four staples in that, in terms of what that optimal look will look like. Morgan Rielly, TJ Brodie, Mark Giordano, and Jake Muzzin are kind of the four. And Brodie, who's a left shot who can play on the right side, occupies one of those spots there. So it's really a matter of what are they going to do with Ilya Lyubushkin, who's fit in really well, especially with Morgan Rielly on that top pair. And then it's a matter of, is it Timothy Liljegren or Justin Hall who kind of fills out that spot? And then what happens with Rasmus Sandin when he comes back from a knee injury? So finding what a top four looks like with those guys has been really difficult to kind of figure out. And the Leafs are still in that figuring out phase. So it's really just going to be a matter of what those top two look like. And then do you really rely on it? Because Mark Giordano has been the third pair guy, but he's been playing over 20 minutes compared to someone like Jake Muzzin, who's been in that top four, but has been averaging 17 since he's been back. So it's really going to be a mismatch, and they're really still try to figure it out until they get into the playoffs here.
Brodie, Giordano, any chance they reignite the former Flame duo?
I'm thinking it's less likely now. I think we would have seen that combination at some point. I think Brodie has been such a stabilizer for some of the other guys, apart from Morgan Rielly. When they split Morgan Rielly and Brodie up, Brodie's been used back to his strong side to stabilize some of the other right-handed shots that they have. So now he's been back on that right shot with someone like Jake Muzzin, who needed that as he came back from injury. And it almost seems like putting him with Giordano doesn't help out one of the other depth guys, where someone like Giordano really helps out with that right-handed shot. So it's looking less likely. They may try it for a game or two, but if they haven't tried it at this point, I really don't think that's going to be an option for the Leafs going forward here.
Dave, thanks for joining us. Enjoy the final 2 weeks, the chase for 60, and of course for a home ice advantage for the Leafs.
Thanks for having me on, guys.
Now let's get to our inbox question of the day. And Chris, this is right up your alley. The question is, what's your best guess on Johnny Gaudreau's AAV on his next contract? He's a pending UFA, of course, has had his first 100-point season, and he turns 29 on August 13th.
Well, first of all, I got to say I pity the Flames, because they've got to contend with Johnny Hockey's contract, but also Matthew Tkachuk, two guys in the top 10 that they both have to renew in the offseason, and that is no small task. So with Johnny Gaudreau, obviously this season's production has been sensational. I think when you're looking at his contract, you need to look at his entire body of work, and he's had a couple of seasons where he's been still very good, but not at this right now he's at 1.36 points per game. That's just astounding. And in the 2 years prior, he was more of a 0.8-ish per game, which is still very good again. But you look at some of the comparables for guys that have signed in their 28, 29 year period. You've got a few on the low end that Calgary is obviously going to be targeting, whether it's Landeskog or Pacioretty, those deals at $7 million. But their production wasn't anything approximating what Goudreau has done this year. So I think those are definitely on the low end. Then you've got some deals on the high end, right? The Jamie Benn deal, Jeff Skinner, and Mark Stone's another one that isn't on that list, but all deals in the 9.5 range. I think those are what Johnny Hockey's camp are going to be looking for. Again, 1.36 production in his platform year is higher than those guys. So I look at a deal that's actually right in between all of those, and that's Blake Wheeler's deal of 5 years at 8.25. And I think Wheeler was a little older when he signed it. He was in his 30s when he signed it, which is maybe why the term is lower. But Wheeler had 91 points in 82 games, so it was over a point a game production in his platform year. And I think to me that's probably the sweet spot, and especially with the Tkachuk extension also needing to be done. I don't think the Flames can get up into the nines to make their cap work with their team. So assuming Johnny wants to help make something work to stay with the Flames organization, I think the number's got to start with an 8. And I think that Wheeler deal is not a bad comparable. He's obviously a bigger player, but similar type playmaker and using speed in his game. So, I think that one might be, a reasonable middle ground that both sides can live with.
Having been in those negotiations, Chris, how much does playoff success, like if Johnny Gaudreau just blows the doors off in the postseason, how much could that help him? And conversely, how much could it potentially hinder him? Or is a 10, 20 game window just not enough to really format a contract around?
No, I think that's a really good point, Jason. And we've seen in the past where the Flames have flamed out, so to speak, and Goudreau hasn't been, much of a factor in those games. And obviously he's a smaller player, so in the playoffs, everything's a heavier game. It's a much more physical game, and it's harder for a player like Goudreau to stand out in those games. But if he can demonstrate this year that he can be a performer in the playoffs and he helps lead them to a couple of series wins or better, I think that will make a big difference because, one of the knocks on him has always been his size, and, he puts up points in the regular season, but can he be a guy to be relied upon to take you to the promised land? Well, if he can show that he is this year, then I think that bodes really well for his side in those contract talks and might bump it up a little more. And if he flames out, that's an argument for Calgary to say, look, you're not worth that 8+, and maybe they try to bring it down to more of the Landeskog type number. So it will be interesting to see how he performs in the playoffs and how that impacts the number going forward.
All right, so now very quickly, the Flames, do they get Goudreau and Tkachuk, one or the other? And if it's only one, who stays in Calgary?
Well, I think if you had to bet on one or the other, the Flames have to choose Tkachuk just given the age. They need to keep him in the fold. But, there have been rumors that Tkachuk over the years hasn't necessarily been 100% happy. So, do you go with a guy who fits the mold as you build your team over the years, or do you go with a guy who's happier to be in the market? I think there's a way that they can get them both done as long as they both agree to maybe take a little less and work with the team to keep that core together since they've played so well. But if they can only keep one, I think it's got to be Tkachuk.
If they keep both, I'm guessing Sean Monahan might be traded in the offseason. So definitely a busy offseason for the Flames, regardless of what they do come playoff time. Let's get to our daily bet segment with Tyler Yaremchuk. Ty, how'd you do last night?
Last night was not great. The Boston Bruins blew a 2-0 lead to the Ottawa Senators. We didn't hit that bet. Bergeron was off the score sheet, but as I do, I will look to bounce back, and I got a couple of plays. It's a light slate tonight in the NHL, but let's jump into it courtesy of our friends at Bet Canada, and this is the matchup I am eyeing up. Look at that. New York Islanders -155 on the money line. Not only do I like them to win this game, I like them to win in regulation. And you're actually getting that at plus 100 on PointsBet as well. The Islanders 6-4-0 in their last 10 games. That's pretty decent. They've lost 3 in a row as well. But how about this? Since March 15th, the Islanders have picked up the 9th most points in the NHL. They've been a top 10 team over the last month. So I have no problem backing them against a Montreal team that is 25th in that span. Also, Montreal on home ice 10-1-4 on the year. Not a great bet at home. Carey Price is returning from Montreal, but this guy hasn't played hockey in so long that, I don't think we're getting the same Carey Price that we got in game 3 or 4 of the Stanley Cup final or in that playoff run when he was playing so well. So I do like going with the Islanders in regulation. And then for my prop, how about that payout on the Brock Nelson assist prop? Plus 185. You're almost getting 2-1 odds on this thing. He's hit it in 3 of his last 4 games, and he's coming off a game against the Penguins where he picked up 2 helpers. So it's a much better matchup. He's been hitting this assist mark a lot, and that payout is just way too good for me to ignore. So that is going to be a wrap on what we are betting on tonight in a rather quiet in the NHL.
Tyler, one of the things that wasn't up on your board, but that our viewers all want to know, since you're in Nashville and you were there last night for Nashville New Oilers, what was the over-under on the beer consumption from you and your buddies?
We got a nice crew here. There were hundreds of Oilers fans in attendance. I don't even know what you would set the line at. I'm just going to say take the over. The over was hit no matter what it was set at, Chris.
Well done. Well done.
Awesome. Thanks, Ty.
Thanks, Tyler.
Now we're going to get to garbage time, Chris, and it's probably not fitting the player we're going to talk about because he's been anything but garbage.
Well, that's right, but when you look at the end of last year, he was kind of left on the side of the road in a trash bag. So we're talking about Vladimir Terethenko, who obviously had only played 34 games in the 2 years prior, had the shoulder problems. St. Louis obviously felt that this guy's career was either done or was in jeopardy, or that they'd rather use the $8 million to do something else because they left him exposed in the expansion draft. And then Seattle just ignored him. They still got a good player in Vince Dunn, but to ignore Vladimir Tarasenko, I think was a mistake. And, obviously both teams miscalculated on this guy, and he has 31 goals, 72 points. He's been really impressive this year. He's the comeback player of the year by anyone's measure, and I find it amazing that that he was all but left for dead.
Well, at 5 points last night. He's been a marvel, and he really, like, when the Blues won, he was their biggest offensive threat. Now, they've got the 2 young guys in Thomas and Kyrou now as well, but, don't sleep on the Blues, because if Vladimir Terethenko gets hot down the stretch here, and as he has been all year, but really heats up, he can be a game breaker. He can be a difference maker for them in the postseason. But you're bang on. I think he's definitely kind of the bounce-back, comeback player, and Seattle, we could probably redo their whole expansion draft. I thought there was a lot of just skilled players that they opted not for and save money. Yeah. And we're seeing the results because they're looking like a normal expansion team, but they had some really good players that they passed on.
Yeah, absolutely. And Tarasenko is the perfect example of that. He's with a proven track record of being able to score, and also a name that they could have sold in the market, right? Obviously they were spooked by the injury and maybe the money, but and hindsight's 20/20, right? So you can't go back and redo that. But I think you're right. There's probably a few bets they would have changed if they could get a redo.
Well, Chris, short and sweet, and of course a little bittersweet, as once again our condolences to Mike Bossy, his family, his former teammates, Islander fans, and everybody in the NHL who knew him. A classy gentleman, gone way too soon at the young age of 65. Frank will be back after hacking it up in the sand and everything else, so he'll fill you in on his golf trip and more on Monday. Have yourselves a great weekend. Enjoy the games. On behalf of Chris, I'm Jason Gregor. See you later.
Thanks for watching the Daily Faceoff Show.
Make sure you hit subscribe on our YouTube channel to never miss an episode.